Warming up.
Oh my gosh, I literally have the calculator still open on my computer. Signs of work. I use the computer calculator.
I remembered to mute before connecting to the stream.
Wow, good job. I'm so proud of you.
Okay, monitors are active. Connections are ready. Scanning to see if anyone will claim to be first.
Let's not encourage this behavior. It's not a race, As long as you're here, we're happy. We should,
And we don't want to be racist.
Didn't mute your tablet.
I can't, because we need that for the timer.
Okay, that was a very loud notification.
That was fasting.
Oh, saying, hey, aren't you fasting by now? Okay, I've shared links. As always, if you are watching, we can't see you're there until you comment. Ooh, I'm really, I look proto molecule glowy. It's like, wow.
Okay, Andre has joined us, as has Andre says saturation's too much.
Yeah, we're trying to figure that out.
There.
Then it's like barely on, but see, it's like I'm glowing with energy. And as much as DSP is not my favorite show, but the songs are super earwormy. I keep hearing the extra music.
I will not comment.
well, that's another episode.
Yeah, we started watching. Well, I started watching.
Yeah, I spared Toby, but then now I'm like, okay, now I'm gonna drag him in so that we can do a show about it.
And I have a lot to say.
Oh my god!
But I get the difference of camps of people who like Game Boys more and people who like the IS Penicula more, because they both hit specific targets, and yeah, that deserves an episode.
Wow! And then, so are you saying like I'm Masa?
Yeah. Well, it really should be saved for the episode.
All right,
but it has to do with exposure.
Ooh.
If you've gone through the gamut of 90s and early 2000 coming out awakening stories,
maybe
then
is that a really a big factor?
Then Game Boys feels more unique because it's a new take on the narrative. But then if you haven't, then Guys of Penicula feels groundbreaking because the stuff that came after that era is a lot of
flowers in spring.
A lot of the stories that came out after the 2000 awakening era is either the dying of AIDS stories,
that is true,
or the sexist gay life stories.
That is
so.
Also
this
true.
Suddenly feels so fresh.
Yes,
but we are going ahead, and today is about science fiction.
You say that with such excitement. Actually, we were weighing like, should we talk about either the new Wonder Woman movie or Tenet? But then we were worried that because of the lack of, theaters, then most people haven't seen either. And then it might be too spoilery.
Yeah, we still want to let people discover and enjoy movies in their own time. Because admittedly, there are people who hate spoilers, and we're among those.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's not just because of not wanting to know what happens, but it has a large part to do with wanting to experience it the way the people who told the story want you to experience it.
And that, requires no foreknowledge of
Yes.
things that are happening.
So, in as much as we have a lot to say about Wonder Woman or about Tenet, um, Tenet, I keep saying it wrong.
David?
Yeah. There's just that desire to not spoil it for others.
And especially, but then like short answer is we love Tenet so much. We definitely want people to experience Tenet in its entirety
Yes.
for the first time.
Yes.
So we could probably talk about Wonder Woman. No, I'm kidding.
1 minute, and we'll start in 1 minute.
Yeah, actually, I had a hard time trying to figure out a title for today's episode, and I ended up with this very long title, which I guess is appropriate.
Because Rocky did not like expanding on the Expanse.
It's so it's so so lowbrow. It's so
But it could
masa.
have also been Amos and the Expanse.
Wow, you've switched it around na. Kanina it was the Expanse and Amos. Now it's Amos and the Expanse. Oh my god.
And it's 9:15. This is Toby.
And this is Rocky.
And if it's your first time here, welcome to Baduy, a little space on the internet where we talk about anything we want.
This is completely unscripted, not entirely accurate, but at least it's honest. Join us as we talk about everything and anything random live.
And if it's not your first time here, thank you so much for joining us again. It's our 122nd episode, and we are focusing on a show that we love watching.
Well, not just the show, but like the whole
Yes.
franchise around it, which is The Expanse.
Mhm.
We're committed to trying to minimize the potential for spoilers in this discussion. The current season, oh my god, we're on season 5 now, which is
Mhm.
ongoing on Amazon
We
Prime
will
Video.
not talk about season 5.
Yeah.
At least that was what we can.
We'll try to limit any show discussions to season 1 as
Mhm.
much as possible, but still like not.
I think the closest
Agree,
we'll
yeah.
do is we will, knowing the key twists
Mm.
of the seasons that have passed, we will avoid directly mentioning them for the
Okay.
sake of those who haven't seen them.
Yeah, because we still, like we just mentioned earlier, we want you to experience it in its entirety, and especially when we super like it. Then yeah,
But knowing that we will still talk about it in some way or another, you'll just have to read between the coded lines. And yes, Noel, we will be hushed for now on 1984. We will discuss that as a separate episode.
because that's when the Transformers woke up when the volcano erupted. I think it was 1984.
So, what is The Expanse?
The Expanse is originally a series of novels written by, under the pen name James S.A. Corey, which is the joint pen name of Daniel Abraham and Ty Frank.
Mm-hmm.
The setting was actually first created for an MMORPG,
Mm-hmm.
and then a tabletop role-playing game, and then eventually became
Novels.
a series of novels. Since then, it has become a TV series. It has become a board game, and has once again become a tabletop RPG. So that's kind of awesome. But yeah, so let's turn to Toby to talk about what's your assessment of, like, how would you explain The Expanse?
I think the best way I could discuss The Expanse would be, so it has a lot of similarities to Firefly. In the sense that
Interesting comparison.
in the sense that you are focusing on a small group of people who happen to get caught up in a lot of trouble.
Oh, okay. I see that angle.
It doesn't follow the narrative threads of something like Star Wars, wherein people are special.
Okay.
Nor does it explore things like Star Trek in the sense that the people are idealistic. The main characters that you will travel with pretty much have their own reasons, their own desires, their own ambitions. And it is through the story that they find themselves pulled together in something that is much larger than themselves. In some ways, there are elements of hard science fiction. And by hard science fiction, we mean they try to really think about how things would make sense in a realistic perspective. So, how does one travel throughout the solar system in a more realistic manner? How does one handle living in other planets? So these elements are not necessarily hand waved, although there is still some hand waving to some extent.
Yeah, of course.
But it's not like Star Wars, for example, wherein every spaceship and their mother can, hover in place and fly around, despite the thrusters only being in the back.
There are repulsor fields, Yeah, it's like how do you deal with inertia? In Star Trek, the hand wave solution is inertial dampeners. In Star Wars, it's inertial compensators. We don't know how they work. They just exist.
And it's not that Expanse doesn't have hand waving. It's just that they still found their own ways to answer things.
Yeah.
Which sound closer to how they might be solved in a more realistic perspective. So in the inertia problem, for example, here they chemically induce themselves into states that can handle the G-forces
A bit more.
which is still hand wavy, yes, but at least it does have that. So it's not just a magical field and you're protected. There is something you have to take or something that has to happen in order to handle things well. They also do the nice thing that some shows like Firefly do, which is space does feel more silent because of the vacuum and its presence.
Which ties to that hard sci-fi thing. And we've seen that depiction sort of previously with the likes of Battlestar Galactica, where in the farther shots of battles, you barely hear sounds. But then when they show combat from the perspective of a fighter or the perspective of the guns of Galactica, that's the only time you hear the firing sounds. My share is that other people say Game of Thrones in space when they try to pimp the series. And I was like trying to avoid this comparison, but I get it. Especially like at the time it came out, when the TV series first came out, it was easiest to compare it to Game of Thrones in the sense that it is a multi-POV story. So there's a lot of jumping around.
Yeah, but I feel that's only because of Abasarala. If she wasn't part of the narrative, they wouldn't really call it a Game of Thrones type of story. Because the characters, despite having different narrative threads,
aren't big players.
And we're not political.
Yeah. So Avasarala,
she was the one who added the manipulations and this and that coming in.
Yeah, I mean, like this, at the start of the series, whether the book or the TV series, you follow, a particular ship crew, you follow a detective, and you follow Avasarala, but who is a member of the UN, and that's like it's a very different perspective. But yeah, in that sense, it's not about. Although there are like, was this rewind? the hard science fiction setting of The Expanse, which ties to why I titled the episode this way, is number one, they don't have faster than light travel, which in most science fiction is like the bare minimum. In Star Trek, you can go to warp. In BSG, you jump. In Star Wars, you also do hyperspace jumps. In The Expanse, because it's like a sort of not so distant future, they do have faster travel, but not super fast, and mankind has only really colonized within this solar system.
So they have little caveats such as you have communications wherein the communications is delayed because it takes time for the signals to travel. You have major fight scenes wherein they've launched the missiles and it's not like they have to dodge it because they know the missiles are coming in 7 minutes and they're now planning what they'll do in this and that because space
is big.
It's an expanse. It's a large space. So it adds those elements in the story which make it feel so much more rich, so much more, engrossing. And going back to The Expanse, so you have the group of characters who have their own little threads of stories that are unfolding. And a large part of what makes it so rich is that they really thought about how if we were a society that has progressed beyond the planet, that
Beyond Earth.
it would forge these different, I guess, nationalities or these different.
Well, they're
what's
generally
the term?
factions. I
Factions.
guess.
There you go. That's the best word. Different factions. So you have the Belters. You have the people from Mars. I don't want to.
Those
call
are the main ones.
I don't want to call them the Martians. There was a term for them. I can't remember. What was the term?
No, but they're
Yeah, but they had the official term.
no.
The Mars MCRN Federation. There you go.
Yeah, okay. But that's like more yeah, okay. But and then the subtle touches is like, because although everybody expanded from Earth in that sense, the population eventually outgrew Earth and tried to expand to the solar system. Then you have little tweaks like Mars, because of the fact that you have a bunch of people whose main goal was to terraform Mars. Game reference. But to try to make Mars livable for people, then they are a very like science first focused society with a single goal, which is the greening of Mars. And then you have the Belters, who were like sent out to mine asteroids and stuff for materials to help the likes of Earth and Mars. And then because they grew up in low gravity, then all the more, I mean, it has physiological changes that they are slightly taller. They have thinner or weaker bones. They can't handle gravity as well. Even Martians, for lack of a better term, don't have the same gravity sort of upbringing as Earth people do. So there are all these little subtle things that really define everyone. So as much as everyone is human, they're not all quite the same anymore, given their time in different parts of space.
And this is even further pushed with, the nods we expect from a science fiction series. The clothing, the language.
Oh my God, Belter Creole
makes
my head hurt.
And it's just, it is such a delight to watch because it feels like such a rich world. Even if, let's face it, Star Trek and Star Wars feels rich the moment you look at it and you see all these different aliens, blue-skinned people, red-skinned people. But as you get used to the show, you start to realize, oh, it's another alien with ridges. Oh, it's another alien with a different skin tone. But it's pretty much the same thing. In Expanse, since these nods are more cultural and more inherent of people who are now living in a different way, it feels so fresh, and yet it feels so familiar. And that's what makes it amazing.
And the TV series, as someone who's read the books, the TV series has done an amazing job of being largely faithful to the source material. Entire exchanges of dialogue, entire scenes have been faithfully adapted and brought to life for the show, which is an amazing feat in itself. And the series is about how many books are we now? It's at least nine books. When Leviathan Falls is still coming out this year, and then there's a bunch of short stories, which are all good. But the first season actually covers book 1 and part of book 2. And normally, especially like in Game of Thrones experience, you kind of get the stretch material. Like you could probably have a book span a season and a half and stuff. Oh my God, Terry's here. We're talking about the Expanse. I got Terry into the show. Yay. Okay, and then but yeah, so the fact that despite how much material they are adapting faithfully into the show, they're still keeping it moving steadily forward. In fact, actually, a lot even of the short story expanded material has worked its way into the show where appropriate already. I mean, it's not entirely perfect. Entire characters have disappeared or have been like merged into new TV versions of themselves. But for the most part, it's a very faithful adaptation. And the differences between the TV show and the books are subtle, but appropriate to each medium, I would say. Is that they still totally work.
So the show opens with a mystery. A woman goes missing. And while that's happening, some members of the crew bear witness to something that has political ramifications.
Another crew not related to the missing woman.
And as these stories converge, everything starts to interconnect. And if not interconnect, influence each other in a way that makes the story much more expansive than expected. And
we can't avoid saying the word expanse. I'm slightly amused and annoyed at the same time.
and it's very well paced. The book approaches things in a different pace than the show, but both nicely unveil things as they move forward. I found myself remembering other stuff I loved, such as the the infamous Robotech series, which was cobbled together from different Japanese anime and repackaged by
Harmony,
Gold
Gold,
into a singular storyline.
who everybody loves. Harmony Gold.
Because it had, it had the reporter, it had the new pilot, and then it had the more military people.
That's an
Suddenly
interesting
interconnecting
comparison.
into this sudden realization about proto culture and aliens. And here we have similar revelations that happen in the later series. So it was interesting in that manner. And then the characters are, this is where I start connecting it to Firefly. I'll have to start with Amos. Because the lead is like an ugly puppy.
Okay. Not spoilery. We need to take a moment to talk about Holden. Okay. Toby, discuss your Holden problem.
Okay, Holden looks like those guys who think they're maangas, but you just end up laughing because they're trying so hard. Uh, Jim Holden, by the books, is what? What would he be described as? We showed the picture in the previous episode.
I'm going to pull it up again, but then it's like,
so Jim Holden is the coffee guzzling.
The description is not. I don't go more visual, but really in terms of personality, he is the sticks his nose into business. I mean, he's self-righteous in that respect. It doesn't necessarily mean he's good. It just means that when he believes he's in the right,
he's a meddler.
Yeah. Oh my God, Professor Allo's so weird in the book. This is the RPG though.
There.
So James Holden in the RPG lower.
There.
Then it's like it's okay. He's not like a super attractive person. But of course, TV series, they gotta up the attractive.
So he's the captain of the Rocinante, an earther, and he basically
an earther, but he works in space.
Yes.
I mean, like he's pretty much amongst the belt communities.
He's played by Stephen Strait, who
you might remember from movies like Sky High and The Covenant.
Yes.
From the early 2000s. Sky High, guys. He was the brooding bully with the fire hands, I think, if I'm not mistaken.
So yeah, he's the lead, and then the love-hate relationship forms between him and Naomi,
who is a belter,
who is the tough belter
engineer.
She wasn't the pilot, sorry. Engineer, second in command type of character, who has a no nonsense attitude but has a heart.
Because she's a belter. Because they're survivalists by nature.
And then filling up the crew is Alex Kamal, who is the pilot.
Yeah, who is formerly, who's originally Martian, but then was working on that same trip.
And has a questionable past to some extent. And
then Toby's real star of the show, Amos.
Amos Burton, played by Wes Chatham, who I did not find hot. But as the show progressed...
I like how we have to set this disclaimer that you did not find him hot.
But as the show progressed, became hotter than Holden. Despite Holden having all these, I'm having the jiggy with it in zero gravity.
Yeah, he has zero G-sex in the first episode.
And I guess it's just that Holden doesn't connect. And Amos is like if Jane had a son.
Jane from Firefly, for people who don't understand the reference.
And was even more narrow-minded than Jane was. Because Jane was very, I want to do this for the money, and I have all these things. But Amos is very...
he is a product of his upbringing.
Yeah, and our read in him is he's a beautiful example of a chaotic neutral character, if you're into
D&D alignment, yeah.
Because his backstory is amazingly complex, to the point that he decides to view things in such a simple manner. And it makes sense.
He's also a survivalist
Mm-hmm.
to some degree, but a very different circumstance than Naomi. Then it's kind of interesting in the beginning where you see that Naomi and Amos are like a super pair.
And
They're not together romantically. They just work together as a team.
and that feeling that Amos won't function without Naomi.
yes,
But then in the later seasons, to see Amos as Amos was amazing
Mm.
because suddenly, why does Holden still exist in the show? In fact, in the latest season, and we won't speak of it in much detail, I'm so happy I'm not seeing much of Holden.
But it's okay. In universe, everybody hates Olden because he's always like doing things. Okay, and then
Well, wait, we have to wrap up the characters.
okay,
We can't, however, skip my favorite right now, and there's two of them. So there's Bobby Draper,
oh, but like she comes in fairly later
Yes.
in the series.
and Bobby Draper is the
Martian soldier.
the hard, tough Martian who
is so tall.
and probably cares more than she wants to admit.
Oh yeah, she's super caring.
And then there's
Good job, Bobby.
There's Avasarala, who is just I want her in a movie with Meryl Streep.
Okay. So when we play our different tabletop role playing games, naturally we peg characters to actors and actresses, and for the longest time, our recurring like interesting personalities are the likes of Judi Dench and Meryl Streep, and very Devil Wears Prada Meryl Streep.
Mhm.
Tilda Swinton makes frequent appearances in our games in various creepy androgynous
Oh,
roles.
so you're really avoiding your boy.
No, you throw him in to annoy me, and it's like an early relationship. But then now Avasarala is already Avasarala is in our vampire game.
She's
Oh my
Banu
God.
Hakim,
Yes,
which is perfect.
it's absolutely perfect for our vampires in Chicago game.
Okay, so Avasarala is the politician in the
Yeah,
story.
and she gives us a sense of scale in sort of the
Mhm.
conflict, and I think that's from a TV perspective. Because the difference between the books and the TV series is that they brought in Avasarala from the very beginning of the
Mhm.
TV series, whereas in the books she kind of has more of a POV role later on.
Yeah.
Um.
She offers a different perspective in the later
Yeah,
novels.
but I think this is definitely an effort to like tackle that Game of Thrones style crowd,
Mhm.
because then they could cover the macro political scale
Yes.
of Earth, Mars, and Belt
and
versus just the on the ground interpersonal struggles of the crew, the detective, and
Mhm.
all the other like individual characters.
I really liked how when they find their lines crossing in the narrative, it doesn't feel forced, despite them coming from such diverse and distant narratives. I mean, you have the politician, and then you have Amos, or you have Holden, and then later you even have the detective. I forgot his name. But when their lines intersect in the story, it's pretty well done. It doesn't feel forced, and um, it doesn't feel so out of the blue, like a guy going down on a boat and happens to see the guy he wants to kill walking on the shore. Kind of bad.
We're not supposed to talk about these other things yet. We're trying not to spoil it for some people, you know. I'm just saying.
Anyway,
Oh my gosh. And then but yeah, so lines blur in terms of like what I like most about all this going on. Yes, definitely Avasarala's actress is amazing. You hire her because you like listening to her,
Mhm.
and you hire her because as cultured and dignified as she is, it's so much fun to hear her swear. And
Mhm.
that's Avasarala in terms of how her character was defined. Now, so there are depending on your entry point, the TV series is definitely a great place to start. It's a little harder to gain access to for some because it's not on Netflix. It is on Amazon Prime Video. And if you go to primevideo.com, you can subscribe and you'll be able to catch up to the whole series and watch the current one. It is going to go as far as a
not
sixth season, and then it's going to end. So the series has a definite endpoint. So that's an interesting projection. So it looks like the TV show is going to end potentially before the end of the book story, or they're gonna jump forward. I don't know. I don't know. We'll see how. But the way things have been going, they've really been roughly tackling a novel per book, per season. So, stuff to think about. The books are definitely monsters to read. I will admit, if the TV series is already like very hard sci-fi for some, the books, oh my god! But if you're into it, it's amazing. It's like, but to be fair, I will say this in all honesty, and you know how much for my friends, you know how much I love Frank Herbert's Dune. The Expanse is still easier to read than Dune. The Expanse is totally easier to read than Dune because it has that same sort of Game of Thrones format where it is POV characters. So each chapter focuses on a different character, and you kind of follow the story along that way, and it helps. It super helps. Yeah. So beyond that, so a few things, and we're not going to go into too much detail like when we do full board game discussions, but there is at least one board game already. It was made by WizKids, so Wizards of the Coast, publications.
Which would make you wonder if the game would be good.
Yeah, and
normally games based on a franchise are oversimplified
or are a reskin of an existing game. And it's made by a guy named Geoff Engelstein, who is not a very common name for board games. But what are you okay?
Yeah.
So we and then the Expanse board game, of all things, is an area control game, which is not my favorite game format. But it's brilliant. So it divides things into the inner planets, which is Earth and Mars, the belt, the belters, and then the outer planets, which is things like Jupiter and Saturn, because there are colonies and research stations and the moons there. And you get to play one of the factions from the franchise. So you can be Earth, you can be Mars, you can be the belt, and the other one, the scientific one,
which we will not speak of until you see the show more.
Yeah. It's not a full-on spoiler, but they're just the other faction, okay, that are involved, and these are represent what?
I had to hide it.
Oh, okay, there. But yeah, so you have Mars, you have the UN or Earth, and then you have the OPA or the belt. So
and one more group that we're not letting you see.
Yeah, and then you start in different parts of the solar system. You start with forces on different parts of the solar system, and then from there you kind of have different goals and different specializations.
You try to score points as you play the game by gaining control of certain areas, but then points are only scored when certain triggers are met. So one might be mobilizing forces to strengthen their hold in certain territories, but as long as you keep the scoring thing from triggering, it's a pointless maneuver. And then later on, they might divert their forces somewhere else because they need to, and then that's when you trigger the scoring, and it's such a satisfying thing in the game.
And then I like the opening spread really feels like the show in the sense that in the beginning, the United Nations or Earth forces are like super clustered around Earth. They're very powerful in the inner planets. Mars comes to the table with some of the best ships in the game. They literally have ships that count for two of the others. The belt are super spread out. They're the only ones who have forces like at the far end of the board. But they have like tiny ships. And worse, they have like ships that only count as half.
Because they're sort of cobbled together or junk.
But they can totally win by like half.
So the game provides tokens, both cardboard tokens and wooden tokens, as your ships.
And it's sad because all the ships look like this. It's like, what? Why did you do this, WizKids? Why?
So we were not satisfied, and I thankfully found a bunch of 3D printable ships.
Yeah, you got someone to do
and had them print them all out. So we have ships based on the ships.
Yeah, I mean, like it's not super accurate. Like the OPA ships are like, they just use that one hauler, to model it. Oh, and then throughout this, is that minor spoiler is that the hero ship of the show is the Rocinante, which is what our little crew, eventually pilots. The Rocinante in the game is not a faction you play. Instead, they're like a free agent that meddles
And flies around.
with different factions depending on who has control, which is totally what they do. That they're not really part of any one faction.
Mhm.
So that's like the board game.
The game is based on the show, so the cards refer to events in the show. There
Oh,
are photos that
oh
show
yes, it
events as
uses
well.
nice photo stills from the show. I'm looking at you, Legendary Firefly, with your very strange art. This one, no qualms. It's a fully franchised game, and they just used stuff from the
Which
show.
did have us having some spoilery moments because we were, well, I was still catching up.
Yeah,
You already finished the first season or the first two seasons.
2 seasons by
And
then.
then we wanted to play this, and then I was looking at the cards, and I was like, "Hey, what does this mean?" And you're like, "Oh no, they're talking about it already." And
The game can spoil him. Mine was like, well, number one, Mai has purchased Leviathan Wakes. Good for you, Mai. And then number two, yeah, we sort of play close to the storyline, which is amazing about playing this game, is that inevitably
it will feel like
you
you're
will
going
feel
to-
like the show. You will totally feel like the show. And you're not locked into the narrative of the show,
Mhm.
but it just reflects that because of the way they designed the factions,
It makes sense.
you behave in certain
Yes.
ways, and it's awesome. Now on the flip side, there is also the role-playing game. I didn't get the GM
Grab it,
screen.
grab it,
Oh,
grab it.
it's so
It's
much
just-
stuff.
No, it's just there. Yeah, there. You can grab those. You don't want to grab the rest?
It's just reference sheets.
Yeah, but you might as well.
Okay.
So you have the Expanse GM screen, which is meant to be used to spread
It's a
out.
threefold.
Yeah. There. To spread out on the table so you can see beautiful artwork, which I'm not allowing you to focus on because it might be spoilery. With the opposite side filled with rules that will help the GM run the game.
Yeah, there's a separate Game Master's kit, which like is just a summary for the GM. And then there are reference sheets for stunts, combat stunts, general social stunts, and all this. There's a whole little pull out for space combat. But yeah, obviously there's a lot of love that went into the game to kind of capture a lot of the detail of the franchise. So it can get a little crunchy, but the game itself is very simple in the sense that it is a 2D10 system, if I'm not mistaken.
3d6.
3D6, sorry. 3D6. And you go along.
So character sheets are, you probably can't see it that well, but it's a lot of written notes and a few stats. It's not a numbers heavy type of game.
Yeah.
You have basically a few.
You can buy like preset combinations,
Mhm.
or you can go through this whole roll your history, which is including where were you born? Are you a belter, an earther, and the like? What was your job? And oh my god, we went through. I know we experimented with like going through character creation, and
But we haven't officially played.
we
it.
haven't officially played it, but it's super tedious, and you're allowed to really just play adventures throughout the universe. You don't have to play the hero story. But of course, like I was showing you pictures earlier, it does have reference material for some of the major players from the books, and
Mhm.
really different representation. Avasarala looks really old in this one.
Yes.
But it's very exciting. It's potentially is a lot easier to get into versus like a lot of modern board games, they're very conscious of playability and
Mhm.
like how easy it is to jump in. So it's not the crunchiest RPG I've read, and the fact that I don't normally read the systems first. Normally, I let Toby do it and explain it to me. I was able to tackle it, and that's fine. So it's in the in a similar realm as like Doctor Who Adventures in Time and Space, which is now just called the Doctor Who RPG. But admittedly, the Doctor Who RPG is still simpler because this has multiple layers of combat. There's a supplementary book just for the ships, which is really why I'm here, and it gives you maps for like navigating the ships. And oh my god, because of the whole hard sci-fi angle, where in Star Trek you have artificial gravity, therefore decks make sense, right? That everybody's just walking on floors. In the Expanse, you don't have artificial gravity. You use thrust to simulate gravity. So while your ship is in motion, you're all getting pushed towards the back. So all the decks are done vertically against the rock, against the thruster.
Mhm.
So the supplementary material for the RPG includes maps of ships and
Yeah,
how they're laid
parang the
out.
cross section, so to speak.
Yes, so that you know which thing is on
Yes.
what. And I'm so happy.
So the show might be a slow burn for some people. It might take you the fourth or the fifth episode before you really connect with it.
Yeah, and especially that first season is rough.
Yeah.
I will admit it's a good first season when you get to the end,
Mhm.
but because there are so many plot lines it has to establish, right? The detective has his own story and he's investigating a mystery
Miller,
which he has to find out. Then you have the crew of eventually the Rocinante.
Yeah, because they weren't the crew yet. at that
Yeah, they
point.
were another ship, and then you have Avasarala mucking around on Earth.
And the connections between them aren't present yet. So,
yeah.
So it's all setting the stage, and it'll give you some time to connect. But I liked how they're all really distinct people. It's not like this person's the brother of that, so they have to stick together. And it really
Which is
had
an
those-
RPG trick.
Yes.
It's like it you could argue that, especially the way it was written, you can definitely feel that the people who end up on the Rocinante are your quote unquote player characters.
Mhm.
I mean, like, they're the party. They're the group traveling together, going on adventures, messing things up.
Yes.
Avasarala is clearly a GM character because she's too awesome to be a player character. It's like she's always right and always, and she gets to be mean to everyone. Bobby Draper joined the game late.
Bobby Draper was like the friend of a friend who
Yeah,
wanted to
hey,
join
you're
in.
playing the space game. Can I join? And then she comes in, and then whoa, she's kind of cool.
And they're like, so what are you used to? Oh, I'm more used to war games.
oh,
You can be a Martian.
you can be a Martian soldier with power armor. Yeah. And I don't know. It's like I love the because of the way that the show is developed, and you kind of feel that
Mhm.
kind of RPG angle in the sense. I mean, and it's hard to describe,
Mhm.
but I don't say player character in a negative way. It's just you can tell that they are the ones who sort of rebel against the story,
Yeah.
but also propel it forward. And you totally get that feel from the crew.
The show has incredible music. Just
yes.
like Battlestar Galactica, the show creates a vibe or an audio world of its own that feels so distinct when you hear it, but never feels as intrusive as other theme songs. There are recurring leitmotifs that do play out. So once you start to realize certain things in the show, which probably for those who watch the show will realize why we're wearing these polos, because they kind of look like them. But beyond
this is
that,
Toby's idea.
but
I
beyond
accepted
that,
it, but this is Toby's.
but then once you recognize those audio cues, you will realize their presence when their presence are, in some ways hinted at. What else? Oh my gosh, it's so hard not to spill the beans about the things that are so great in the latest season.
And then a super minor thing. Me being a big science fiction person, I love starship porn, and this show is great. In addition, there is a YouTube channel called Space Talk, which any science fiction fan should have encountered by now. You super love Space Talk. They have detailed ship breakdown discussions for most of the major ships featured on the Expanse, because they got to work with the creative team to work on these breakdowns. So it's super accurate, and you get very smart specialized ships, because a lot of shows by default end up with the ships that do everything.
Yes.
So like a Star Destroyer in Star Wars is crazy as an element of a larger navy, because it's a carrier that is a battleship, blah blah blah. in the Expanse, ships are highly specialized in what they can do. You can recognize the big battleships versus the corvettes. They don't bother with fighters because there's just really no room in this world for the fighter analogy. And just overall combat just makes sense. And I keep going I keep going back to the fact that they use long range missiles, which have end up being some of the most boring, quote unquote, boring fights. Because really, like, fire missiles. They fired missiles back. Drink coffee. Wait, discuss. And we're staring at the screen.
Missiles are closing in.
Missiles are flying at each other because they're so far away.
And it's really too soon to do anything at that distance.
Because the missiles can fly faster than the ships because they're not worried about crushing people to a pulp with high G's. It's a very unique thing, and my gosh.
So dissecting the show for those who might dive into it. It has conspiracy, it has mystery, it has elements of romance. It has good fight scenes and
super good, whether it's on the ground or in space. Yes. Great fight scenes.
And what makes those fight scenes so much more awesome is how you see them utilize the environment. Because it's such a factor in the fight. Whether it's because of zero gravity, whether it's because of the kind of location they're in, the walls they're close to, or the technology they have at their disposal, the fights never feel like they're just throwing bullets at each other. There's a lot of thought behind every fight.
And this is a science fiction universe that doesn't have like shields or special armor. So like when they're in combat, they have to wear spacesuits in case the main chambers, breach. And true enough, you will have so many fight scenes where you have bullets literally flying through the cockpit area, and they're all just like hoping they don't get hit because there's no other way. The series really, when I sell Doctor Who to people, we tell them to watch Blink.
Yes.
When I sell The Expanse to people, which is a larger investment, but I need you to get to like the third or fourth episode. When, long story short is, when they get the Rocinante.
Yes.
Once the crew gets the Rocinante.
Once they become a crew.
On the Rocinante, then it all just comes together. And by then you're super invested. But until then, I beg your patience and indulgence. Go with the show. Take notes if you need to in the beginning because there is a lot of jumping around and names being thrown left and right.
But they never make it as annoyingly confusing as The Witcher did.
Oh, yes. The Witcher, because of its non-linear format, made it extra difficult, even though they had fewer characters. No, this one, it does make sense. It super makes sense. It's just that if it's like Game of Thrones at the beginning, where you introduce to this, because you're trying to establish who all the players are, it's a little harder to kind of just jump in. That's my only warning for you. But yeah, and then on a minor note, I'm sure people can play the Expanse role-playing game without really knowing the world very well, but that you kind of lose some of the flavor of it, which is like the joy of playing any franchise-related game. That when you know it, then it's all the more interesting.
We are looking at running a few sessions of the Expanse role-playing game this year. So if you would like to try the game, take the chance now to get into the show. Watch the
at least watch the first 2 seasons.
So by the time we do open up the doors for the chance to play the game, then we're more prepared to experience it.
Oh yeah, I forgot. I know the book. Okay, gotta go. And then for the board game, which is like it's actually quite wildly available. Like you can see it more often than not, and even like Hobbs and Lands or Neutral Grounds. It's pretty good. And even if you don't know the show,
it still works.
It's pretty good. And I don't like area control games. So the Expanse role-playing game, in case you're wondering, focuses on the period between the first and second books only, and which is just about the end of the first season. So it's a good jumping point. So you don't have to super watch so far to get into it. And I love the fact that one of the elements is the churn tracker, which shows things getting worse. And the churn is also the title of a short story which focused on Amos, which is finally getting covered in season 5. Oh my god. I super love this. This is the bee's knees, guys. I mean, some controversies outside the show aside, and we recognize that there are definitely problems, and it's just as well that the show will end with its 6th season.
Yeah.
But as a whole, it's a brilliant thing, and this is really this is the main thing I wait for. No other show at the moment that compared to this. This is what I super wait for. Cobra Kai is close. No.
And we will save that for a different episode.
Yes, the Cobra Kai is just fun. It's just super fun. Okay.
Any last few comments?
My Mamiya was late, but she does agree that it's super awesome. And yeah, the last thing we just mind talking about, when we played the board game, we actually played very close to the plot of the show, which was kind of awesome. But yeah, so and then I know Jed earlier was saying something new to binge on.
Yes.
Yeah, it's a great time to get into the series, and if you get Prime Video, you can watch at the very least all of seasons 1 to 4, and then season 5 is in progress. Maya's admitting she watches Expanse season 5 before Discovery. To be fair, it comes out earlier in the week. So the Expanse is out by Wednesday, and then Discovery you have to wait for Friday, Saturday. But hey, Discovery is wrapping up, and Picard is just around the corner, so we're gonna have to move on. So it's a good time, guys. It's a good time for even science fiction. Sorry, in all stupidity, I will say that The Expanse alone is worth my Amazon Prime subscription.
Yes.
There are a few other shows we really invest in on Amazon Prime other than The Expanse.
If you really, really enjoyed Battlestar Galactica and you've been wondering when there would be a show that was that awesome, this is it.
This is it. And I have no books to show you because I have them all on Kindle. I should Kindle. But yeah, so that's The Expanse, and I hope that this show helps. If you were on the fence about getting into it and or had never heard about it and are wondering what the heck we're talking about, I hope that our excitement has carried through and it gets you into it. I mean, I get super excited. As I keep deferring to Toby for the non-hard sci-fi perspective, because then he comes to it more from the TV film thing, and he enjoys it too. See.
And Amos is a bonus.
And it's funny because he's not attractive.
He's not attractive.
He's
not hot. But the way they made his character works.
Yeah.
He's so fun to watch because whenever he's in a scene,
it's how is Amos gonna solve this problem?
What will Amos do?
Yeah.
And that's what makes it so worth it. But yeah, that's The Expanse. Karen asks, is it better to jump into the franchise via book or through the episodes? I would say if you start with the show, then you might want to dive into the books to see more of why those things happen. If you do start with the books, that's fine too. But for me, I haven't seen the book. I haven't read the books, but I'm still enjoying it so much.
As someone who has read the books, I will admit, I guess it depends also on if you read a lot of science fiction, then by all means you can start with the books first and then get into the series. But if science fiction is not your especially hard sci-fi, it's not your primary book genre, then there's no problem with starting with the series first and then going back to the books later. Because again, the books can get a little heavy. You can try. I mean, to get a taste for the style of writing, the one of the short stories, which is and of course I had the page open, but it's gone.
There.
Drive. Was
It's
this
7 pages.
It's 7 pages long, and you just have to Google it because it is on the website. Um, it is not something you buy.
Yeah.
So you can kind of get a
It's a good way
flavor
to taste it.
for the thing. So I can paste a link later on. But then what Expanse book should you start with? No choice. It is a numbered series. You start with Leviathan Wakes. It is a very tight series that happens from one to the other. You cannot, at least for the main books, you cannot jump around. The short stories are a lot of prequel material or material in between stuff. There are guides online for how to read the Expanse. But at minimum, read the books in numbered order. That's your simplest guide. There are 8 so far, and the last one is because you gotta admit that in a 9-book series, the first book is Leviathan Wakes, the last book is Leviathan Falls,
and that can have many meanings.
Who is Leviathan? Okay, so actually the book titles are very heavy because it's like Leviathan Wakes, Caliban's War, Abaddon's Gate, Cibola Burn, Nemesis Games, Babylon's Ashes, Persepolis Rising, Tiamat's Wrath, and then Leviathan Falls. And all of the books are 500 to 600 pages long. And note, I still feel this is easier to read than Dune. So take it as you will. But at least if you get into the show, then you can join me in my geekery and like celebrating it. You can watch Space Talk if you want to know more about the spaceships. There are all these analysis videos on YouTube of each season's arc and the decisions, and we all love this series so much. And I'm very glad that Amazon saved it because it was originally a sci-fi
and it was supposed
channel
to get
production.
canceled.
It officially got canceled, and then it got saved. That's a story in itself. The Expanse. Wow. Any other questions? I super love this series. I super do. Why didn't we do this episode sooner?
Yeah, I guess that's it. There's no more questions. So that's all the time we have for this episode. We had a lot of fun, and we hope you'll join us again next time.
If you have questions or suggestions for future episode topics, fill out the Google form at bit.ly Baduy Pride Ideas. This topic was all us, and I'm so glad we talked about it. You can follow us on Twitter, Toby No Shade, RG Sunico.
You can also check out our blog, baduypride.com, for all the previous episodes and stuff about us.
Feel free to continue the conversation in the comments below. Are you into The Expanse? Did you start with the books? Did you start with the show? Did you play the board game and have no idea what was going on? Let us know in the comments. And of course, be sure to subscribe for notifications, whether on Facebook or YouTube, so you don't miss our next live stream. Once again, I'm Rocky.
And I'm Toby.
And this is Baduy Pride. Have a good evening, everyone. It's almost the weekend.